Doe. Now this morning when we first got into court, I told you all earlier they were going to be talking about or addressing the motion for the mistrial, because yesterday they said they wanted the government to respond and to hear what they had to say, so they're supposed to write a letter or whatever. Well, so basically they're claiming that there was no reason for the mistrial motion. It was based on the fact that Diddy's team feels like the prosecution engaged in prosecutorial misconduct because, in fact, they allowed Brianna Bongolan to give testimony that they knew was not true, because they knew the defense had information to debunk whatever she said about the day that Diddy supposedly dangled her over the balcony, right? So that is called perjurious testimony. Now, of course, the prosecution wanted, basically they're trying to say it wasn't perjurious testimony, and the judge basically said that, they gave a good cross-exam. They were able to debunk her story, or to at least poke holes in her story during cross-examination. And so, that shouldn't be a big deal, and they should not even be worried about that. Basically, is what the judge said in a nutshell. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's irrelevant, okay? Whether or not they were able to do a good cross-examination and prove that she wasn't accurate in things that she said, that's beside the point. Because the rule of law is, okay, in criminal procedures, is that you're not supposed to allow the prosecution, okay, it's not supposed to allow a witness to give perjurious testimony when they know that, in fact, it isn't true, and also to further double down on it by admitting hearsay evidence. Okay, which is exactly what they did. Okay, now that's just my opinion, but the judge saw it how he wanted to see it. So that all being said, they basically, had a little back and forth, because Diddy's team, I believe it was Alexandra Shapiro, okay, she was speaking on behalf of Diddy's team, and she was talking about that was not relevant, whether or not, they did a good cross-examination, had nothing to do with it, and I agree. And she basically said that this woman said things that were not true. She didn't have all the facts together. They allowed this to be admitted in, and she felt like this was grounds for a mistrial. Not just that, the fact that they gave the hearsay evidence. Now, we all know that hearsay is not supposed to be admissible in a court of law, but nonetheless, they allowed it to fly. I mean, it just seems to me like the judge is siding with the prosecution. That's just my opinion. Okay, take it with a grain of salt, if you will. But nonetheless, the motion was denied, as I knew it would be. But I feel like the reason for the denial was not really, it didn't seem fair to me. And now, again, I'm not on Team Diddy, but I'm just telling you, according to the rules of law, that didn't sound right. Because why would you let someone say something you know is false, and you know that there's something else, there's evidence to prove that what this person said isn't true, okay? So they had this big to-do about that. They went on for talking about that for about 15 minutes before they even allowed the jury to enter the courtroom. Now, finally, when the jury did come in, that's when they began the cross-examination of Miss Jane Doe. And who's doing the cross-examination? Well, I'm so glad you asked. It is Teeny Garagos. Hey, how you doing, beloved? It is Teeny Garagos. Okay, and by the way, her father, Mark Garagos, is sitting on the pew right in front of us today. He's there to get a bird's eye view and see what's going down. So they go on, they said that the defense was able, now here's what the judge and the prosecution said about the motion for the mistrial. They said the defense was able to vigorously attack Ms. Bongolan's testimony. And they also were able to object and provide evidence of disputing Bongolan's disputing the Bongolan's testimony as well. And they also had motion to strike on certain exhibits, and so therefore the motion was denied. Okay, and there were some things that they didn't want admitted in also, certain motions that had been put out. They wanted those to be stricken from the record, but that motion was also denied. Now there's another thing with Dr. Hughes. If you remember, Dr. Hughes is the expert witness, okay, who testified about Cassie's mental state. Now, she didn't say Cassie specifically. She spoke in general about people who experience trauma and different things like that, and how they may keep going back to their abuser or put up with certain things that a normal thinking person would not do. And so they were talking about having her testimony stricken from the record. Okay, so I find that interesting. So anyway, the bottom line is Diddy's not getting a mistrial, okay? Not today, Diddy. Try again, okay? Even though I don't agree with what the judge had to say about it, but Diddy's not getting no damn mistrial. That's all I'm saying. So anyway, And then Smizer, for the prosecution, she stood up and she basically didn't even really explain her logic. And I thought it was interesting because Shapiro called her out. She was like, the funny thing is, Smizer didn't even bother to explain why Bongolan's testimony was needed, okay, why they even needed her testimony. And then also there was an issue with one of the jurors. Now that's what I thought was going on yesterday, because they had a sitting in court waiting for about 20 minutes before it got started. If you all remember, I told you all it started a little later than usual. That's because they were having a sidebar and they were talking about one of the jurors, but none of us knew what was really going on. So now come to find out, they said juror number 6, they talked about juror number 6 being stricken. Okay, now the defense objects to this. And so I don't know why exactly they want this juror stricken, but whatever the reason is, the defense is not there for it. Okay, so they, hey beloved, they had something to say about that. So anyway, now let's talk about Tina Garagos getting into this cross-examination, okay? Ha! Yeah, that's right, try again, Diddy, okay? So Tina Garagos starts talking to Jane Doe, and she's talking to her about, you know, how long it's been since she spoke with Diddy. Now remember, she said all this stuff about Diddy doing her dirty and, you know, them breaking up, and he was, you know, put knots upside her head and bruised her eye and all this stuff, right? But you know, she got back with him. And in fact, she was still dealing with him when he was arrested. Okay, she was actually supposed to have one of those hotel nights with him, okay, right before he got arrested. This was all planned on September the 9th, and then he was arrested on September the 16th. So he didn't get to have his little kinky thing, okay? So she says, when was the last time you spoke with him? She says, it's 8 months since his arrest. And you haven't seen him until Friday, right? This past Friday. And she says, yes. Okay, she says, and here's what I thought was interesting. She said, you met with the feds about 24 times, right? And you were instructed on how to answer questions under cross. And then she says, how many times were you instructed on how to do this? And when the prosecution, the government, was telling you how to answer questions under cross, did they invite other prosecutors in? And she said yes. Now here's the thing that I find interesting. They really sit down and talk to these people, coach them on how to talk under cross-examination. Don't y'all find that interesting? And I'm just wondering, when they talk to them, are they telling them what to say and how to say it? Like, how does that all work? What are they saying to them? Because it sounds like a little scripted to me. I'm just saying. Okay, I find it very interesting that they have these people being coached on how to talk under cross-examination. So anyway, then she went on to ask her about Homeland Security coming to her house in March. And she said, you didn't go to them, right? Or you didn't answer the door, you didn't want to talk to them. She said, no. And she said, were there warrants? Were there warrants in 2024? She says, there were warrants, but you chose not to speak with them. And you had gotten back with Mr. Combs at that time, right? And she says, yes. So then the prosecution objects. Now, I don't know what they're objecting for. I guess they didn't like the way she asked the question. So the judge just asked her to rephrase it, which she did. So then she says, in February of 2024, you got back with Mr. Combs, AKA Diddy. And she says, yes. Now, when you knew that he was under investigation, you knew this when you got back with him, right? She says, yes. So she knew that Diddy was under a federal investigation for a RICO, but she still chose to get back with this man. Now, why would you get back with somebody who's, first of all, under a RICO investigation? Okay, make that make sense. Because 9 times out of 10, depending on your relationship with that person before, you know, they actually got under investigation, wouldn't you say that you might get yourself in some trouble? I wouldn't want to be within 10 feet of those people. Thank you, Anthony, for your contribution to the channel, beloved. Peace, love, and blessings. Okay, so anyway, she says, you were granted immunity. See, all of these people that are testifying have all been given immunity. Okay, so which is interesting because that means that they all must have committed some sort of crime. Okay, please pay attention. So she says, you got immunity. She says, yes. And then she says, basically asking her, how do you feel about Mr. Combs? You said you still had love for him, right? And she said, yes, I'm still in love with him. She literally said she's still in love with this man. The man that she fled from, locked herself in a room, and he kicked in the door, kicked it in, and then came in and put knots upside her head. She had to hide for him for two hours. But she says she's still in love with this man, the man who made you have numerous partners in a night, sometimes lasting in excess of 24 hours, okay? Sometimes lasting for days at a time, to the point that you ended up going to the doctor. She says she's still in love with this man. I don't know what Diddy does to these women that makes them just be so head over heels for him. I find it all so crazy. So anyway, she says, I resent, now this is what Jane Doe said. She said she still is in love with him. She said, but I resent him leading me into the lifestyle. So then Titi says, you chose to participate in that lifestyle for years, right? Like, girl, you said you resent him leading you into it, but yet you let him lead you into it. Because he didn't drag you into it. He talked you into it. And you could have easily said, no, I don't roll like that. No, that's not how I get down. But you didn't say that. So you went for it. So anyway, she says, you chose to participate in this lifestyle for years, right? She says, I was under pressure. And Tini says, you feel resentful that you had sex with other men for all this time, right? And she says, I was hooked. She says, I was hooked. I was hooked on the love and the affection. And I wanted to be a good girlfriend. Okay, I'm sorry, good girlfriends don't sleep with other men. And if you have a man that in fact wants you to sleep with other men, that's not a good boyfriend. Okay, you might want to just leave him alone. That's all I'm saying. But this is what she said. Now, she says she wanted to be a good girlfriend, and she says, you came back. Now, Tini says this, the defense. She says, you came back because you loved his love and affection, right? She says, yes, that's why I came back. And then she says, the why as to why you came back to doing those nights, those hotel nights over and over again, is something that you claim you still struggle with. And she says, you loved Diddy, or you loved Mr. Combs, and you still love him, right? She says, yes. You said you loved taking care of him. She says, yes, I loved giving him foot rubs, okay? I loved bathing him. She says, I love putting on his favorite show. And then Tini asked her, what's his favorite show? She said, Dateline. And she said, we'd watch it for hours till we fell asleep. That sounds romantic. Okay, how about not? So anyway, she says, I didn't want him to feel judged, okay? And then Tini says, you would look through his phone, right? And you would look at the messages that he received. And she said, yes. She said, so he gave you a lot of freedom to have his phone and stuff, things that his other girlfriends couldn't do. And she said, so he must have trusted you. And she was like, yeah, you know, he trusted me. And so what were you? She said, so you were loving these things. And she said, you were loving these things. And she says, yes. He'd say that he loved me and never wanted me to leave. The affection and the love making. That's truly the only reason that I enjoyed the hotel nights. Because I knew that I could spend time with him after it was over with. So anyway, they start talking about how she went on this trip with him to Turks and Caicos. And also she says they went to New York in 2023 when he released his Love album. She was there with him. And she says, you tried to be very sexy. Now, mind you, this part was hilarious because Tini says, you tried to be very sexy, right? She says, I didn't try. I did, and I was. And so Tini said, well, you are very beautiful. She was letting her know, honey, I wasn't trying to be sexy, baby. I am sexy, honey. Diddy had 6-inch stilettos, and he had outfits hanging in the closet. And she said, did you pick out the outfits? And she said, we both picked it out. It was a mixture of both of us picking it out, honey. She had on those high heel stilettos, probably the red ones, you know, the ones the feds confiscated from down there in Star Island. She probably had those on, honey, because she said they were in Diddy's closet. Okay, those were probably actually Diddy's heels, and he probably just let her borrow them if you ask me. But hey, what do I know? So anyway, she goes on to say, can you give us an example of some of the explicit things that you said to Mr. Combs? Now, this is where I'm like, wait a minute, what? Where is this all going? Why is she about to embarrass the hell out of this lady and tell her to tell us in open court what she said to Diddy when she's talking sexy, honey? So anyway, she goes on to say, here's what she said, if y'all want to hear it. Here it goes. She said that when she would have the S workers there, and they're getting out into their little groove and about to do the do, she says that Sean, he would have them doing role play. So she said when they're doing the role play, she would act like Diddy's going out of town, or Sean as she calls him, and then she call up the lover, and once he get there, she tell him, oh yeah, Sean's going out of town, so I'm gonna cheat on him. So come on over here and give me what you got, basically. Okay, that's what they would do. And Diddy would be sitting there waiting in the wings, watching and listening and just getting cheap thrills, okay? I want y'all to pay attention. So just imagine what kind of fantasies was Diddy having her to do. Okay, he's wanting her to pretend he's out of town and she's sneaking somebody in his house so they can get busy. We gotta hurry up and do it though, because he'll be back in any second. We don't know when he's coming back. So anyway, she said, I would say that I'm sneaking someone into the house to cheat. And she says, you were wearing those high heels? I don't know why that was important, but she said, you were wearing those high heels when you did this? And she says, yes. She said, she said, do you wear those heels in real life? You wear those all the time? And she's like, oh no, I only wear like 3 or 4 inch heels in real life. Okay, so this is all crazy. Anyway, I'm gonna skip past some of this because I thought it was nefarious. Now then she goes on to say, that she wanted Diddy to buy her a house because she wanted something bigger. Not only did she want something bigger for herself and her son, but she wanted something nice and to Diddy's liking, and she wanted something that was safe and something that was private, because she said they were spending a lot of time at these hotels where they were having the hotel nights, and she's figuring that, oh, we can just get a bigger house for me, and then we can have the freak-offs, aka the hotel nights, at my house, which I think that's absolutely crazy. You're inviting strangers to your house to have freak-offs. Make it all make sense. So that's why she claims she wants this bigger house. So anyway, when she went to get the house, she found the house she wanted. She sent Diddy a picture of it, and she was telling him how much she loves him and how she's so glad that he's doing this for her. And basically, they wanted $40,000 down on the house. Okay, so Diddy paid the $40,000, and then she wanted another $20,000 to put furniture. Now I want you all to pay attention, because I don't know if she realized this, but you know what Teeny was doing with this kind of questioning? Because at first I'm thinking, why is Teeny asking her all this? Well, Teeny is painting her out to be a gold digger. That's what it sounds like. She says you wanted him to give you $40,000 for the house. The payment was $10,000 a month. He was paying for it. And then you told him that you needed $20,000 because you needed to get new furniture. And she says, we saw pictures of the house yesterday, and that's some nice furniture. Okay, so she's really making it look like, girl, you just wanted all this money. Okay, so anyway, I don't know if the witness caught that, but that's exactly what was going on here. I thought it was all so interesting and clearly nefarious. Please pay attention. So then she says, Diddy sent her an audio. Now, they played it in court, and this was hilarious. So on the audio, which was sent March the 25th of 2023, okay, of course, this is before he was arrested and before the raid. This is 2023. Don't get the dates mixed up, because he was raided March the 25th of 2024. Okay, so anyway, Diddy sent her this audio after she texted him saying, I'm taking off, because I guess they were going on a trip. So Diddy calls her, or at least the audio saying, great time. Come on, man. This is what he says, great time, stay in the light. He says, you are the crack pipe. Now, I don't know what he meant by that, but she thought it was cute. He said, you're the crack pipe, or should I call you CP? So much effing fun. Now go rest up, get in your bag, okay? Bunch of kissing sounds you heard. Okay, then she leaves him an audio, and she says, I'm dying about your crack pipe. She said, it's so real for the both of us. Definitely staying in the light. I had so much fun. Okay, it's just like another. It's like no other. And she says, I'm such a lucky girl. And then she put all these heart and smiley emojis, and then she's sending him kissy sounds too. Okay, I guess they were all in love at this point, and that's when he was probably, in my opinion, trying to get her groomed so that now he's love bombing her, and so she'll start doing these freaky deaky things when he asks her to do it. Okay, so anyway, what do y'all think? What did you say, Panther Trike? So she's digging. Yeah, Mel said, so she calls that lucky. Yeah, she did. She said she's such a lucky girl. I find it all interesting. So anyway, she told him health is wealth for both of us, and I love you so much. All right, and then she says, ooh, yeah, your new love contract. Now I want you to pay attention. That's when she made the kissing sounds. She said the love contract. This is the contract that Diddy made with her, letting her know that he was actually going to put her in this new house and going to be paying her $10,000 a month. Okay, so she was excited about that. All right, so now I see why she was all in love with him. My paper's getting wet up out here, y'all, so I'm about to go back in, honey. I'll be back, okay, at lunchtime to give y'all another update. But at the end of the day, this is getting real juicy real quick. And the prosecution has objected a couple of times. Once it was sustained, the judge just told her to rephrase or whatever, or re-ask the question, and then it was basically overruled. Now, they're not really going in on her really hard, in my opinion. You know, they haven't really tripped her up in anything, but what they have done is taken her own words, as far as I'm concerned, and kind of used them against her to paint her as somebody who was out there being an opportunist and who wanted money. And here's another thing. They said to her, wasn't your friend dating Mr. Combs before you dated him? Your friend was with him for 2 years. Your friend really was interested in him, right? She really cared about him. And she didn't want to say yes to that, I guess. So she says, well, you know, they did date for 2 years. So how's that making her look? You're dating somebody who your ex doesn't like and who your friend used to date for 2 whole years. Does she not see how this is making her look from the way Teeny is posing the questions, okay? And now she's talking about all this money that he's been giving you, and then you're asking him for more money and all of this stuff because you need furniture and all this stuff. You see how the picture's being painted? I'm just looking at the faces of the jurors, okay? That's what I'm paying attention to. I made sure to get a good seat so I can see how the jurors are reacting to all of this. But anyway, I have to go. I love you all to life. Each one teach one. That's how we grow and thrive. Do something productive, constructive, but never destructive. And always remember, beloveds, to keep the Most High first in your lives. Peace.